Hello and welcome to my updated tier list for the base game corporations in Terraforming Mars. I already made a tier list in April of 2021, so almost 3 years ago. Since then, the meta in competitive play has changed quite a bit, and I've gotten better at the game as well. This has changed my opinion on a lot of these corps, and that's why I have decided to give you an updated version of this tier list, same as I have done with the preludes tier list a few months ago. First of all, I want to state that this tier list only considers the 12 base game corporations, but I'll rank them as though we were playing with the preludes and Hellas and Elysium expansion as well, since that's what most people do anyways. However, prelude corps will be covered in a different video. I'll also talk about how additional expansions would change the rating of these corps, so that you get the info, but that won't change the placement in this video at all. And lastly, this tier list is based on my experience of playing this game online. I have quite a bit of experience, but I'm also not the best player in the world, and this is my subjective opinion, so if you disagree with any of my ratings, just leave a comment down below and we can discuss it. When going through the list of corps alphabetically, the first one to appear is Credicor, and it's immediately a powerhouse. Credicor starts with 57 MC, no tech, and an ability that reads, after playing a card or standard project with a base cost of 20 or more, you get 4 MC back. What is so good about Credicor? First of all, it has the second highest amount of MC to start off with, and the fourth highest starting capital when you factor in minerals. This can allow you to focus on production or TR with your preludes, and keep a lot of cards at the start of the game, which makes you insanely flexible. Alternatively, it enables you to get out a super expensive card like Mobile Area, Asteroid Mining or IO Mining Industries in Gen 1. Which also combos with your ability, and that leads me to my second point. With Credicor you get a large rebate on some of the best cards in the game, and again, the fact that cards over 20 can fit into basically any strategy makes this corp super flexible. There are production cards, point cards and card draws for a long game, or heat producers or space events for a rush. You're not forced to go a certain route with this corp, which is something I really like. And then there's also the combo potential with standard tech. After playing that card, you can place greeneries for 16 MC, cheaper than buying and playing Plantation for example. This can be super handy to secure Gardener and Landlord, or just score a boatload of points together with super cheap SP cities that you can place as well. But talking about milestones, this is probably Credicor's only weakness. Other than for Gardener, you're a pretty generic corp when it comes to milestones. Still, when only considering base game and preludes, Credicor is an S-tier corp for me. Not much will change when adding the other expansions, other than power creep I guess. Corps like Point Luna or Manutech feel stronger than Credicor, but are probably not as flexible. The new mechanics are all no problem for this corp, and it performs well in the longer games that you should expect when playing with all expansions as well. Next up, we got another strong corp, but this time it's way more specialized. Ecoline can do one thing and one thing only. It can play a really strong ground game. Why? Well, it starts with 36 MC, 3 plants and 2 plant prod, the corresponding tech, and an ability that lets you convert 7 plants to a greenery instead of 8. Of course, the ability and the plants already steer you towards a ground game, but the 36 MC do it as well. You just don't have enough money to do anything else. The main weakness of a long game strategy is that it loses to a rush player if the game ends too fast. You really need to develop your engine quickly, and with Ecoline you can't do that because you just don't have enough money for it. This inflexibility is the main weakness of Ecoline. If you don't have the right starting hand for it, meaning no heat prod, early tile placement, space events or protector tabs, then you just can't pick this corp. Preludes make it a lot better, since their boost to your starting capital or economy affect poor corps like Ecoline much more, percentage-wise, than richer corps like Credicor. Also, Ecoline has a few milestones and awards it can nearly auto-win, like Gardener, Ecologist, Polar Explorer, Landlord and Cultivator. And with that, Ecoline is still A tier for me. It's by far the best rush corp in the base game, it can completely steamroll opponents if you get the right cards, and it's fun to play. If we take the other expansions into account, Ecoline is in a weird spot. On the one hand, the percentage of plant-destroying cards in the deck, which you hate, shrinks significantly, and you'll have a lot more freedom on the board, since a lot of opponents will focus on something other than ground game. But on the other hand, Ecoline is not well suited for the longer games that you can expect, and it is often too poor to take real advantage of the new mechanics introduced by colonies and turmoil. Of course, if you have spare cash, try to get the greens in power whenever you can, but all in all, I think it's worse off than the expansions. What Ecoline is for plants, Helion is for heat. Helion starts with 42 MC, a space tech, and 3 heat prot. Its ability lets you spend heat as MC whenever you want. Okay, my opening statement about Helion wasn't necessarily true. With Ecoline, you need to go for a rush. The corp is really bad in any other scenario. With Helion, you're actually quite flexible. Of course, you want to pick this corp if you have some heat prot on your starting hand. If you then get some rush pieces like space events and most importantly, good plant producers that get unlocked on the heat track like heather, bushes or trees, then you should definitely go for a rush. However, if you get long game pieces like AI and Earthcat, or your opponent is just outscoring you in the early game, you can use your heat as MC and drag the game on. What I want to say is that in most cases with Helion, you have tremendous power over the temperature track, and can therefore decide how long the game is going to last. If you are confident that you can win in a rush, then use your heat to increase the temperature, and if not, use it as MC. This all sounds good, but this corp has some serious weaknesses as well. First of all, heat is worth more than MC, so this ability is on paper not that great. Sure, it grants flexibility, but if you just want economic development, it's better to just play mineral or MC prot. Secondly, Helion is really bad on all milestones and mostly all of the awards. Sure, you might have a tiny advantage on Terraformer, but it doesn't really tip the scale. And then the only award on which you might think Helion performs well, Thermalist, is actually often a trap. With Helion, you want to spend all of your heat in the late game, even if the temperature track is maxed out. So you are actually much worse on that award than you might have thought. Overall, I think Helion is a B tier corp. In my mind, it's very average in comparison to the other base game corps. As I said earlier, the expansions tend to make the game longer, which doesn't affect Helion too much, but this may be just a bit worse. With Turmoil, you should really focus on getting the Calvinists into power as soon as possible and as often as possible. You can also use the ability to get to 3 power prot to trade, and at the same time get some heat prot rather effectively. Next up, we get to another fan favorite and really fun to play corporation, Interplanetary Cinematics. It starts off with 30 MC, 20 steel, a building tech and a rebate of 2 MC on all events. I debated long and hard where to place this corp. It's surely one of the best in the game, but it also has a few shortcomings, but let's dissect it one by one. First of all, this corp has the highest starting capital in the base game, when also factoring in minerals. But it ties with Mining Guild for the second lowest MC amount to start off with. This means one thing. If you don't have any building tags and no card draw, don't pick this corp unless you have to. Preludes can sometimes alleviate this a bit. As I said with Ecoline, they are strongest with corps with low resources. But still, Interplanetary Cinematics is super unflexible, and you're going to have a horrendous early game if your 20 steel is just sitting there unused for a couple of gens. But this also means that if you have some good early game building tags, you can jumpstart your economy like no other corp. And if you have advanced alloys, your start becomes absolutely insane, with an equivalent of 90 MC of starting capital. The interesting aspect about IC is that its ability actually has nothing to do with all I've just talked about. There's no event in the game that is a building tag at the same time. And I'd much rather pick IC with a few building tags but no event tags on hand than vice versa. Especially expensive space events benefit only marginally from your bonus. They often are still good cards, but don't get trapped into playing AAA just because you get a 2 MC rebate on it. When talking milestones and awards, Builder and Legend are obviously great for you, sometimes even Terraformer. All in all, I think Interplanetary Cinematics is one of the best, maybe even the best base game corp in the right scenario, but is a really bad pick in some cases. Sure, building tags are the most common cards in the game, but there are still plenty of starting hands where you get none or at least no playable ones. For me, IC is A tier because of this. In the expansions, I don't think IC performs better or worse. For colonies, you're going to love all of the building tags that increase your power prot, but that's the case for pretty much everybody else. so you just have an easier time playing them. In Turmoil, you should probably focus on Mars first. Next up, we have probably the weirdest corp of the base game, Inventrix. It starts with 45 MC, a science tech, and as your first action, you straight up draw 3 cards. Then, it also has an ability that lets you increase or decrease global requirements for cards by 2 steps whenever you're playing a card. Inventrix has 3 strengths that correspond to 3 different scenarios in which I would pick this corp. First, I like to pick it when my starting hand sucks ass, because it's the only corp in the base game that just grants you some card draw for free. Secondly, I like to pick it if I have a strong science payoff on hand that I want to get down as soon as possible, since again, it's the only corp in the base game with a science tech. And then lastly, I like to pick Inventrix when I have kelp farming, or to a lesser extent, algae or methane from Titan on hand. With your ability, you can get these massively influential cards down much sooner, and in general, that ability often allows you to get an insane ground game going. The only problem Inventrix has is that it's quite weak economically. 45 MC is average, and in contrast to nearly all of the other corps, you get no discounts, rebates, or free prod. So you really have to make the most out of what your ability allows you to do. For milestones, it's of course great for planner, but on H&E, you're also deceptively strong on tactician and ecologist. Overall, I think Inventrix is a bit underrated, but I don't think I can place it higher than B tier still. In the expansions, keep in mind that your ability works with the Venus parameter as well, making it strictly better than the ability of MSI. This can allow you to get some of the busted Venus cards, like sulfur-eating bacteria, stratospheric birds, or Venusian animals out super early. Not much changes with colonies or turmoil though. Let's talk about Mining Guild, my favorite corp when I just started playing this game. I liked it so much that it was the topic of the first ever video I made way back in 2021. It starts with 30 MC, 5 steel, 1 steel prod, 2 building tags, and an ability that grants you a steel prod whenever you place a tile on a spot that grants minerals as a placement bonus. Similarly to Ecoline, Mining Guild is rather poor at the start of the game, and needs a quite specific starting hand to work out well. You want cheap tile placement cards as well as a few building tags and or card draw to then make use of the enormous amounts of steel you'll get throughout the game. Perfect cards for Mining Guild are Mining Rights, Mining Area, Nuke Zone, Natural Preserve, and a Restricted Area. Similarly to Ecoline, you benefit heavily from preludes being added to the game, since they can help you to keep more cards or afford more expensive tile placements like Ice Asteroid. And also similar to Ecoline, you have a few milestones and awards that you're nearly guaranteed to win. Mining Guild is a heavy favorite on Builder, Contractor, and Miner. But that's where the similarities end. While Ecoline is a phenomenal rush corp, Mining Guild excels at playing a long game, with an insane economy and card draw. Preludes might help you get down your tile placements in Gen 1, but they also tremendously increase the speed of the game, and can therefore make it hard for Mining Guild to excel at what it is best. All in all, I think Mining Guild is very situational. Basically, it's unpickable if you don't have good early game tile placements on your starting hand. Also, you can just get screwed and not find enough building tags to capitalize on your enormous steel prod. And lastly, for newer players, it's often quite hard to find a balance between placing tiles on mineral spots in the early game to boost your economy, and placing them on plants and ocean rebate spots to get a good ocean walk going. I think Mining Guild is B tier, but probably the weakest B tier corporation, since it's so niche. I think the expansions do not necessarily favor Mining Guild. Sure, the game is usually longer than with just base game and preludes, but the percentage of tile placement cards and cheap special tiles in the deck is much lower, meaning that you often don't find enough of them early on. Also, the percentage of building tags in base game plus preludes is much higher than in the complete deck, so when playing with all expansions, you often run out of playable building tags in the late game. So far, I haven't rated a single corp lower than B tier. That's about to change now, because I'm going to talk about Phobolog. This corp starts with just 23 MC, 10 titanium, a space tag, and an ability that makes your titanium resources be worth 4 MC instead of 3. This makes Phobolog the poorest corp in just looking at MC, but the second richest when taking minerals into account, just behind IC. Now, it's abundantly clear that due to this, Phobolog is insanely reliant on a good starting hand. If you don't have playable space tags in your starting hand, you cannot pick this corp. Your start will just be way too slow. Additionally, a lot of space tags are either combo pieces like satellites, or just straight up better suited to be played in a mid to late game, like the big space events. Of course, preludes do help a lot to get your economy up to speed, but still, no other corp has dead starting hands as often as Phobolog. In addition to that, Phobolog is exceptionally bad on almost all milestones and awards, especially on the base game map. Don't get me wrong, Phobolog can work well with the right starting hand. For example, if you get IO mining and some continuous card draw, you're in a strong position to pull off an insane Jovian strategy. But on average, this corporation sucks to play. For me, it's definitely F tier, and maybe even the worst corp in the base game. The other expansions do in fact help out Phobolog quite a bit. Of course, because they make the game longer, which can counteract the fact that your start is often a bit slower than that of other corps, but more importantly, because of the increased focus on space tags. Base game plus preludes has a percentage of 20% of space tags. That percentage increases to 23.4 when playing with all expansions, and it's definitely noticeable. Next up, we get a much better space corporation. Saturn Systems starts off with 42 MC, a titanium prot and a Jovian tag. Its ability lets you increase your MC prot by 1 whenever anyone including you plays a Jovian tag. This also means that you effectively start with an MC prot as well. Why is Saturn Systems any better than Phobolog? It comes down to one thing: its economic situation at the start of the game. It has 19 MC more than Phobolog and effectively starts with the equivalent of 4 MC prot. This makes Saturn Systems a lot more flexible than Phobolog. You don't have to go for Jovians/space tags if your starting hand doesn't line up like that. You have enough money to play something else if you want. On top of that, in almost any game, you'll get some free MC prot, since it doesn't even matter whether you or your opponent plays a Jovian tag. But similar to Phobolog, you should often try to get some card draw, because everyone will try to deny Saturn Systems each and every Jovian tag in the draft. Of course, you can interpret this as a strength of the corp as well. Your opponent will skip some cards that he would have liked just to cut Jovians that are probably useless for him. And you can then in turn make use of these cards you get instead. Another similarity to Phobolog is the apparent weakness on most milestones, except of course on Rim Settler. But all in all, I think Saturn Systems is a truly average corporation. In my mind, it's B tier. Not bad, but not great either. The expansions make Saturn Systems just a bit stronger in my opinion. Just because games tend to last a bit longer than just with base game and preludes, and that favors the Jovian strategy. But let's stop with the bad or average corps and get right back to the top with Terractor. This corp starts off with 6 MC, an Earth tag, and an ability that grants you a discount of 3 MC on all Earth tags. For me, Terractor is right up there with Credicor as one of the best corps in the game. You have the highest amount of MC at the start of the game, making you insanely flexible with whatever strategy you want to go for. In addition to that, you get a discount on one of the strongest tags in the game. Earth tags are in my opinion consistently better than other tags and cover a wide variety of strategies. It's true that Terractor doesn't have a fallback strategy like Credicor that can open a game with a bad starting hand by just SPing a few greeneries to claim Gardener. But instead Terractor has in my opinion the better discount, especially for the early game. Terractor struggles a bit with milestones, but with this starting capital you are so flexible that you should often have no problems to get at least one. As teased earlier, I think Terractor is an S tier corporation. It has grown on me quite a bit, and I genuinely think it's really strong. This does not change at all in the expansions, I just think that more corporations join it in S tier. Let's talk about Tharsis Republic next. It starts with 40 MC, a building tag, and as your first action you get to place a city tile for free. Your ability grants you 1 MC prot whenever a city is placed on Mars, and 3 MC whenever you yourself place a city anywhere. This means that you effectively start with 1 MC prot and 43 MC. I think a lot of new players like to play Tharsis. This is pretty easy to explain. A, games just tend to go longer with newer players because they make mistakes, it's fun to set up an engine, and difficult to pull off a rush. And B, newer players just tend to go overboard with cities. And if everyone places a few cities in the early to mid game, Tharsis can get a really strong economy for free. Tharsis tends not to perform that well with more experienced players though. If your opponent rushes, it's very well possible that he won't place a single city, and then your ability will only proc on your own cities. But if the game ends too quickly, cities are just not worth the high investment, even with the bonus of Tharsis. Tharsis really only performs really well if the game drags on a bit, especially if the heat lags after the oxygen. Because if a lot of greeneries are still getting placed after the oxygen is maxed out, cities become really valuable to generate points. Coincidentally, Tharsis Republic is also one of the best corps for claiming all 3 milestones on the base game map Tharsis. Your free city makes Maya super easy. The building tech on the corp itself and the fact that city cards on Mars and the required power prod cards are building techs makes Builder easy, and Gardener just combos really well with your city game plan. On the other maps, it's not as good, but Tharsis has an inherent edge on all ground game related goals like Polar Explorer or State Dealer. All in all, I think Tharsis is a B-tier corporation. I think in the expansions, Tharsis falls off a bit, since ground game is not as important. Now we get to my least favorite corp of the base game, Thorgate. It starts off with 48 MC, a power prod, and the respective tech, as well as an ability that grants you a 3 MC discount on all future power techs, as well as the standard project power plant. This corporation is so incredibly bland. The starting capital is average, the power tech is super useless in the base game, with its only combo potential being Power Grid and Power Supply Consortium, and the ability is so incredibly weak. Sure, a 3 MC discount on power techs can be useful, but in the base game you mostly play power cards to play power-hungry cards, and that doesn't happen that often. I rarely end the game with more than 4 or 5 power techs. Sure, the discount makes them relatively cheap, and you could then play them to use the power mainly as a heat source, but this is kinda underwhelming. In addition to being weak, it's just incredibly one-sided. Power techs do only one thing most of the time. They grant you power. Sure, there are some exceptions that do stuff in addition to granting power prod, but it's in no way comparable to earth techs or building techs that do a variety of different things and therefore fit in all kinds of strategies and scenarios. In the base game at least, I think Thorgate is really bad and deserves to be placed in F tier together with Phobolog. This does indeed change quite a bit when playing with the expansions, just because of one mechanic: trading. Thorgate guarantees you to get 3 power prod incredibly cheaply, because even if you don't draw any power prod cards, you could just SP 2 power prod to get up to 3, and then you can start trading in Gen 2. So that's definitely a reason to play Thorgate if you're playing with colonies. And lastly for this tier list, we get to UNMI. This corporation is well known to be rather weak, but in my mind it's not F tier, and I'll explain why. But first, UNMI starts off with 40 MC, an Earth tech, and an ability that allows you to, once per gen, spend 3 MC to get 1 TR, but only if you've increased your TR already that gen. The main problem with UNMI is its bad economic situation, and the fact that if you want to make use of your ability, 3 MC is tied up each gen. This means you have very little capital left to play economic development cards or card draw. And since you don't have any discounts or rebates and only 40 MC to start with, you cannot really go for any other strategy than the usual heavy TR rush fest you see UNMI players do all the time. So UNMI really is a one-trick pony and needs quite a specific starting hand, optimally including cheap TR increasing cards like Nuke Zone or Bribe Committee, as well as some heat prod. But in contrast to Phobolog, I think that UNMI is way stronger when it does work. And on Tharsis at least, you have Terraformer as a really good milestone. On the other maps, you can at least try to go for Legend or Benefactor. As teased earlier, UNMI is not an F tier corp in my opinion. I think, in fact, it's the only C tier corp in the base game. It's definitely not great on average, but can absolutely pop off with the right starting hand every once in a while. In the expansions, I think UNMI gets way worse. It just doesn't excel in the long game, and it doesn't have the starting capital to make use of the new gameplay mechanics like colonies or the politics system. And that's it. All 12 base game corporations ranked. What do you think about these corps? Do you agree with my ratings? Also, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. It really helps me out. And don't forget to check out my Twitch channel, where I stream Terraforming Mars regularly. See you in the next video.